Hello everyone, this is the Week 2 summary response. I'm going with video this week to offer you some variety. And again, I will read from the document that's also included in your lessons folder for Week 2. It's titled Week 2 Summary Response. You can look forward also to this document containing some visual charts that I'm hoping will simplify your learning about the variety of options there are with approaches and how it is that they vary, and what kinds of decisions your choice of options hinges on. Let me say that over again. What kinds of decisions your choice of options hinges on. So let's begin. You can look forward to visuals in this summary response. Here is the list of headings contained in this response document. The statements add up. Question marks, tip for the next weeks. Data is invisible until analyzed. What filter will you apply and why? Approaches contextualize information. And then for visuals, we have the Continuum of Options. Research starts with observation, whether of the literature or a case, and simplified major choices. So we'll begin with the first topic. The statements add up. By combining weeks 1 and 2, everyone now has experienced drafting a topic, problem, and purpose statement. In some cases, the topic statements were closed. They were hypotheses. As you extended the discussion into the problem you wish to address and the way in which your study will approach that problem, your topic might have shifted, might have been challenged or reinforced. In some cases, this led to investigating the literature. This flow is appropriate. For your dissertation research design, you'll need to substantiate these statements with references to the literature. You have also imagined your participants and an interviewee. Oops, excuse me, that was my little buzzer. You have also imagined your participants and an interviewee for this class. Some of you have imagined using different approaches to address the topic. In a nutshell, different approaches ask different questions. I'll repeat that. Different approaches ask different questions. The statements you're drafting begin to come together when you choose a research question to explore in the interview for this course. After the interview, you'll then analyze the transcript for themes, and this is key, using methods and seeking details that correspond with your chosen approach. Now I'm going to repeat that last paragraph for emphasis. The statements you're drafting now, they begin to come together when you choose a research question that you'll explore in the interview for this course. After that interview, you'll analyze the transcript for themes. And this is key. You'll use methods and seek details that correspond with your chosen approach. Next topic. Question marks. Tip for the next weeks. If your research question does not end with a question mark, it's not a question. Even studies that test hypotheses ask questions. For example, will so-and-so happen if so-and-so happens? For dissertation research, you must know and substantiate why you're asking the question, what it will contribute to the literature. Knowing these two things, the question, what, and the reason, why, leads one naturally into seeking how. What approach gets at the question as well as the purpose of asking the question? What approach gets at the question as well as the purpose of asking the question? Next topic. Data is invisible until analyzed. What filter will you apply and why? If you sense that an approach does not fit your study, it's helpful to articulate the reasons in a detailed manner. This discloses your priorities and your views, which builds a stronger case for the approach you do choose. Until the interview for this course, explore the approaches and turn your topic into different questions. Often, simply articulating a new question adds insight into the topic. This always reminds me of turning a prism in the window light, and each turn refracts the light differently, showing the light as different colors and shapes. Is there one way to show all that the light is? Approaches contextualize information. For example, stories about eating donuts could be analyzed with or without consideration of the social factors that influenced the experience or the telling of the story. Hence, a social component could be or not be included in the description of the experience. Either decision reflects the researcher's views, such as the belief about the nature of experience, not just the experience of eating a donut, the nature of experience, and the nature of storying experience for self and others, or the researcher's priority of explanation or description. The Continuum of Options. This is where we get into the visuals. As you are well aware, the approaches you are reading about differ, although each is considered to be qualitative. How do we make sense of the options? Ellingson, in this book, created a visual map of the approaches. In the following excerpts in the document, Ellingson describes her understanding of the approaches as scaled, according to 7 dimensions of analysis and representation: goals, questions, methods, writing styles, the researcher as or not as data, vocabularies, and criteria. 7 dimensions. She then plots the variation in categories from left to right, moving from humanism toward increasing positivism. You'll see this in the visual. The way she's done this is a great example of thematic analysis. She produced a description of the field of qualitative research based on themes, and the sub-themes she then organized into categories. So I'm scrolling past those 2 pages. And she provides a detailed description of each section of the continuum: the left end, the left end, the middle end, and the right end. Well, that's probably getting reversed on your screen. The left end, the middle end, and the right end. So I'll read. She says, and this is just verbatim quote, at the left end of the continuum, researchers value humanistic, openly subjective knowledge, such as that embodied in stories, poetry, photography, and intimate others, community members, or strangers. Among the artistic interpretivists, truths are multiple, fluctuating, and ambiguous. Autoethnographers, performance studies scholars, and others engaged in such practices embrace aesthetics and evocation of emotion and identification as equally or even more important than illumination of a particular topic. Analysis and representation merge to a great degree as art is produced, based upon experiences or empirical materials. That's the left end of the continuum. That's the humanistic end. In the middle of the continuum, in the middle ground, she says, qualitative researchers adopt social constructionist or postmodernist influenced perspectives of meaning as intersubjective and co-created, but also as retaining emphasis on the significance of commonalities and connections across the objects of analysis. Middle ground work often concerns the construction of patterns. We talked about that in the seminar. These patterns could be themes, categories, portrayals, as well as practicalities. as well as practicalities, like for applied research, recommendations for action, empowerment of marginalized groups. First-person voice departs from the passive voice that characterizes positivist work, which will be at the right end of the continuum. So first-person voice departs from the passive voice that characterizes positivist work, moving away from objectivity and toward intersubjectivity, but not all the way to avowed subjectivity of art. So it's between the humanist and the positivist. Researchers in the middle ground acknowledge claims of truth as contingent upon, among other things, the politics of research funding, indeterminacy of language in which authors express claims, and fallibility of human sense-making. Now, at the far right of the qualitative continuum, emphasis on valid and reliable knowledge as generated by neutral researchers utilizing the scientific method to discover universal truth reflects an epistemology commonly referred to as positivism. Few, if any, qualitative researchers currently subscribe to an absolute faith in positivism. Many positivists or researchers who believe that achievement of objectivity and value-free inquiry are not possible, nonetheless embrace the goal of production of generalizable knowledge through realist methods and minimization of researcher bias with objectivity as a regulatory ideal, rather than an attainable goal, an ideal instead of a goal. Post-positivists commonly utilize qualitative methods that bridge quantitative methods in which researchers conduct an inductive analysis of textual data. They form a typology grounded in the data, and that contrasts with using a pre-existing validated typology. They use the derived typology to sort the data into categories and then count the frequencies of each theme or category across the data. Such research typically emphasizes validity of the coding schema, intercoder reliability, and careful delineation of procedures, including random or otherwise systematic sampling of texts. Other post-positivist qualitative research modeled showed similar research processes, but without quantification of themes or categories. So in other words, at the right end of the continuum, the post-positivist qualitative researcher can count or not count themes or categories. So that was the continuum. So within each of those segments of the continuum, there are options, there are different approaches, and the approaches span the entire, there are approaches that are between the left and the middle, or between the middle and the right, as well as approaches that fall pretty neatly, pretty squarely on those positions. And I want to add here, which is not in the document, that the author, Ellingson, she's advocating for opening up the approaches to more commingling of approaches. And so when you see her graphic, you'll see lines. Instead of separating the rows in the table with straight lines, she has a lot of diagonal lines showing that they can all connect in various configurations. So now on to the next topic. Research starts with observation, whether of the literature or a case. Research starts with observation, whether of the literature or a case. So if you were navigating a ship at sea, which method would you use? Deductive, inductive, or abductive reasoning? The following two images in the document are copied from this book, Visualizing Social Science Research by Wielden and Alberg. And I want to add too that the book I held up earlier was just published. I believe this is the 2012 book. One of these is 2012. and the other is 2013. So these are brand new books, and I recommend them. So if you were navigating a ship at sea, which method would you use to find your way home? Deductive, inductive, or abductive reasoning, or to figure out where you are? The following two images in the document show the differences between deductive, inductive, and abductive reasoning and when they're used in research. So a shorthand is to think of it this way. Deductive involves hypotheses. Inductive involves explorations. Deductive tests. Inductive explores, builds, refines. So the shorthand would be, hypotheses are linked with literature and they test that literature. Explorations are linked with relevant cases and they build or refine understanding. So hypotheses are linked with literature and test that literature, and explorations are linked with relevant cases and build and or refine understanding. So the visuals that Wahlberg and, I do that each time, Wielden and Ahlberg provide us, I believe are helpful in this regard. So you'll see deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning compared in one visual chart as two routes you can take in social science reasoning. A third avenue is abductive reasoning, which uses both. So abductive reasoning is what is used in mixed method studies that combine qualitative and quantitative approaches. And deductive reasoning is more associated with quantitative approaches, and inductive reasoning is more associated with qualitative approaches. But again, it's on a continuum. So there can be a mix of reasoning in either qualitative or quantitative studies. Now, on to simplified major choices. Basically, how I like to think of it is, one of the ways to simplify it is to ask myself, do I want to test pre-existing theories from the literature, or do I want to explore data to build or refine other general conclusions? So do I want to apply the literature to the data to see if there's a fit, or do I want to listen first to the data and then refer to the literature to inform my observations of the data and to comment on the literature? So will you test pre-existing theories from the literature or explore data to build or refine other general conclusions? The next two images, again by Wielden and Ahlberg, they depict the paths that we can take depending on the type of reasoning we use to study our topic. The first image is a matching grid, so it matches the roles of theory, researcher, and findings with the general reasoning approach, quantitative, qualitative, or pragmatic. Now verbally that's probably very confusing, but it would be for me. So that's why I'm doing these visuals, giving you these visuals. So if you take a look at the document and you look at this very simple visual, I believe they're doing an elegant job of conveying this concept visually. And they actually extracted it from, you can see on the bottom there's a citation, Morgan 2007. The image following this image, so the second image, maps three common qualitative approaches. They are ethnography, phenomenology, and grounded theory. Ethnography, phenomenology, and grounded theory. Now, I've noticed a way that these three approaches vary in terms of the amount of pre-given structure for the analysis. So while phenomenology tends towards pre-structured analysis, it's determined ahead of time how you'll approach the transcript, what you'll look for, how you'll code it, and how you'll report it. Ethnography is partially pre-structured. It has preset ways of going about coding the data and things to look for, and the researcher can also use emergent inspirations. And the other end of the spectrum is grounded theory, which is the most emergent of the three. So now I'm scrolling past those. Please do take a look at those closely and follow their logic and see if it resonates with you. And you may want to modify these visuals for your own use, or you may want to create a completely different way to represent the approaches. I would suggest, if I were to do it again, I would create a decision tree. So I would do much as what they have done. I would take my question and begin to match it visually with the method, with the approach, with the participants, and I believe I would just visually map it out and then see how that corresponded with the way approaches were structured. If I were to look at the definitions and the elements of different approaches, I would have then my visual map to compare with those. And for my learning style, that's helpful. So you'll come into your own as well. I would like to invite you to share with the class any visuals you create that you feel would be applicable to others, as either immediately applicable or for modifying and using as inspiration for our own. So I hope this is helpful, and I look forward to more interaction online.